1, 0. Ignition, liftoff. Semper Fi, aim high.
And welcome to the second hour of American Agenda. I'm Heather Childers.
And I'm Bob Sellers. Thanks for being with us, folks. Well, reports are saying that an alleged Chinese spy named Christine Fang formed extensive relationships with local and national politicians with the intention to infiltrate and influence political circles in the U.S. Officials believe this operation was initiated by a Chinese international spy agency between 2011 and 15. Among the most notable politicians Fang had ties with, Congressman of California, Eric Swalwell. Joining us now with the latest information on the story, former acting director of national intelligence, Richard Grenell. So, sir, tell us what we need to know about this story, because there are a lot of things at work here. So what do you think is the most important component?
Well, there's a whole bunch of this story that the public doesn't know about because much of it is classified information. But let me talk a little bit about what's in the public domain. And it's very concerning. We know that Eric Swalwell has been somebody who has really downplayed the threat from China, literally mocking it and pretending that the Russia threat was a bigger threat than China. This has been a problem for many of the politicians. I'm not sure why it's taken people so long to understand the threat from China. I think COVID-19 has changed some minds. We certainly see bipartisan support now for going after the supply chain that's been in China. But particularly with this story with Eric Swalwell, I think it goes to a troubling place where we have politicians, a certain number of them who are up and coming, who the Chinese target, and these politicians have fallen for the bait. There's a whole bunch of salacious information about this, and I think the intelligence community knows exactly what happened, but are not sharing too much publicly, other than the warnings that Eric Swalwell and others, certainly we know congressmen, congresswomen, mayors, and governors have been targeted by the Chinese diplomats and Chinese authorities. And all of our politicians in the United States need to be aware that they can be targets, that the Chinese will push on them. They'll use their leverage in every way possible. And they certainly used the leverage during this COVID-19 and when governors were seeking protective gear, masks and gloves and other protective gear that happened to be made in China. In the very beginning, the Chinese had a monopoly on that. Thankfully, President Trump changed that pretty quickly. But we were in a situation where the Chinese were using this leverage during a pandemic against politicians, and many politicians were falling for it.
You know, and specifically with this particular incident involving Christine Fang and Swalwell, this goes back to when she was his, chief bundler for his 2014 re-election campaign. And from what I understand, this also targeted, as you were mentioning, other Democrats specifically, but no Republicans have been mentioned so far in California. And it was so bad that the FBI was so concerned that they had to intervene with Swalwell and provide a defense briefing to let him know what's going on.
These defense briefings are really important, and many times they're not well received, to be honest. And in first inquiry, they're not always received as something that politicians want to hear. They don't believe it. And I would say that somebody like Eric Swalwell, who sits on the intelligence community, sits on the House Intelligence Committee, really needs to be more aware of the threats. Again, he really was dismissive of these Chinese threats. And you have to wonder if he was dismissive of these Chinese threats because he was working with somebody who was providing him a lot of access and a lot of money and a lot of other favors for access to the Chinese government and to people who were close to the Chinese government.
And so what kind of information do you think the Chinese are getting? What kind of leverage are they using? And what are they getting out of it?
Well, they get a variety of information. When you obviously know politicians, you know committee issues, legislative issues that are coming. You're able to block or talk to others to block incoming legislation. And that's what we're dealing with here in a variety of ways with congresspeople, mayors, and governors, is China being very aggressive about what's coming up and using the information to benefit themselves. I can't go into great detail simply because a lot of this is still classified information. But let me just say that we've known the strategy of the Chinese for a very long time, and we've tried to combat it. I think more needs to be done. We need to be very clear-eyed about how the Chinese talk glowingly about Joe Biden and other Democrats. Jake Sullivan, who is a national security advisor to Joe Biden, has really had very troublesome statements about China, about the rise of China, about managing and working with a China that is going to be a dominant power. We need to understand that the communist Chinese secrecy is one of the reasons why we've had this pandemic that has shut down our global economy. Governments around the world, not just the United States, need to be very clear-eyed about what the secret Chinese ways have done. 17 U.S. intelligence agencies came together and were very clear that COVID-19 started in China and that it was spread because of the secret communist ways. They were not honest with us, with the WHO, with the UN, with their allies, and with their partners around the world. And so we need to understand what we're dealing with China. You know, lastly, I know we don't have much time, but I think that this engagement strategy with China that we started 20 years ago by allowing China to get into the WTO, I think we've got to be very honest that engagement with China has not worked. We thought it would work. We thought that we could get them to go towards greater human rights, the rule of law, and it's clear that it has not worked. More engagement with China has not worked, and we need to be honest about that.
And just finally, because as you said, we're out of time, are you fearful that that is the direction the Biden administration will go? And incidents like this with Swalwell specifically, does that make him a target of blackmail, and should he resign?
Eric Swalwell clearly is a target of blackmail by being this close and having the intelligence community have to step in. Again, he's on the Intelligence Committee in the House. This is something that he should immediately step down from, and there should be a full investigation. This is really a troubling circumstance. And on your other question with Joe Biden, he and his whole team have demonstrated that they are very close to China. They need to be more clear-eyed that China is on the rise and that we can stop them if we have collective policy to do so with our Western allies.
All right, Richard Grenell, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your insight.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.